Hello, and welcome to episode 33 of the Left Crew Politics podcast. I'll be your host for this episode, Jeremy Gruhlkey, and I'm going to be joined in just a little bit by returning guest Matt Rogers of Politidope, Inc. We got a lot to talk about today. Obviously, in the great Venn diagram of current events, coronavirus is the huge circle dominating the background, and everything else has become a smaller circle intersecting that to various degrees. So our discussion today will likewise be dominated by the coronavirus and its effects on every issue, from the competency of the Trump administration to our elections and the ongoing contest for the Democratic nomination between Bernie and Biden, and even something as esoteric as insider trading by members of Congress, which was a fun little news story that popped up this week. So I'm really looking forward to discussing all of that with Matt today. But let me start with this. The coronavirus itself is not a political issue. Trump didn't create it. Trump didn't cause it. Trump doesn't even really understand it, which will be a keystone point we'll no doubt keep returning to in our discussion today. But the fact of the matter is that how Trump and his administration handle the crisis caused by coronavirus very much is a political issue. And it's a government accountability issue. It's a real-time crisis with real-time consequences and real-time decisions being made. And that requires real-time evaluation of those choices and consequences and real-time accountability. It would be political even if Trump were handling it with flying colors, which he is not. And it is political because the actions Trump, his administration, and the GOP Senate choose to take or not take, and even how they discuss the virus itself, are informed by their political ideology. The most important facets of that ideology are the modern conservatives' tendency to dismiss both science and the effective role government plays not just in a crisis, but in the formation and management of our society and its infrastructure. You can see those ideologies played out live every morning during Trump's daily briefing as he contradicts his own experts and touts solutions that really aren't. They're basically propaganda rallies full of adulation for dear leader. And now, you better believe Trump is deliberately creating and will campaign on a false narrative that centers on the brilliant management no one else could have accomplished. That's political. So I don't have any tolerance for Republicans pointing fingers and crying politicization. That specious cry is now what it has always been: deflection. So we're going to talk about coronavirus today, and we are going to do so through a political lens because, like it or not, it's a political issue. And with that, I'd like to bring in my guest today, Mr. Matt Rogers. How are you doing today, Matt?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on again.
No problem. Matt is the Chief of Staff for Senator Dave Marsden of the Virginia State Senate, and he's the Executive VP and co-founder of Politidope, Inc., which is a grassroots organization dedicated to increasing young voter turnout and working to create more informed young voters. Do I have that right, Matt?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And how does that work? What exactly does your organization do?
So it's grassroots because it was started by just my wife and I. We don't have any big, institutional funding. We go and get our own. We essentially go hunt our own and get our own food. So we, because of different jobs that I've done in the past, I know folks that may end up, I meet them and can help a campaign maybe that they know about. So I've worked from lower levels to city council, school board, all the way to U.S. Congress, and possibly have had conversations this year with some U.S. Senate candidates. But that's I don't count my eggs before they hatch, I guess, so to speak. And so,
right.
But we do all kinds of different event planning. We've planned non-political events like vacations or weddings for folks, or bridal showers, all the way to political events, fundraising, and we put a large percentage of the money that we make from doing that stuff into the Politidope Emerging Leaders program. And so that's a program for 13 to 17-year-old kids before they're even able to get registered, to understand what it even means to be registered and how they can also affect democracy the other 364 days of the year, or 363 if you include a president, a cycle where you vote in the primary, or
right.
This year in the presidential cycle here in Virginia, we have 3 different election days. Well, actually 4 because we have city council as well. So
and just that's not done on the same day as one of the other elections, the city council.
The one first, not city council. I believe it's school board here in May. And I should know this, but there are a couple other things going on in the world at the moment.
Right.
So that's what we do.
Yeah, that all sounds very cool. And I think that, we're going to talk about Bernie and Biden a little later in the show, which is definitely the young voters or young people, because you can't really call them young voters unless they vote, right? So you're trying to turn young people into young voters. I think that's definitely something that needs to happen. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit later, especially when we get down to Bernie and Biden, why it doesn't happen more. So I think that your organization is doing great stuff. And I wonder how much it's actually affecting, or organizations like yours and young voters are actually affecting the election that we're currently in.
Yep.
Because it should be a lot more, I think, than it is.
Yes.
And you're in Virginia, obviously. How's the state there handling the virus? Are you in levels of quarantine or shutdown? What's going on?
So restaurants have moved to like non-essential. You can still do takeout. You can still go to certain stores. We've shut down the schools for the next couple weeks here, but it hasn't officially, as far as I've seen, we have not announced that the school year is over. Different sports leagues have been postponed for a few weeks. But you can still go to the store, and our level of quarantine, there are a lot of people who are taking walks at this point or jogging. The only problem I see with that, which is it's actually good to get out and get some fresh air, but people are traveling in a little too large of packs. I hear you guys in California don't have that. The authorities will, if you're walking in a larger group, they'll break you up.
They're supposed to. They've been breaking people up on the beach and things like that. We're in the city of LA. Mayor Garcetti announced a safer at home order, which is basically, it's not like you're locked into your own home, but more or less everything outside your home is shut down except for pharmacies, grocery stores, and food delivery. So there's not really anything to do if you go out there. Now, LA is an outdoorsy kind of place, so people are still going out and taking walks and hiking and trying to get down to the beach, but they're enforcing sort of social distancing rules as much as they can. Now they can't be everywhere all the time, but like there's a place I like to go to hike called Runyon Canyon. It's right in the middle of the city. I went last week, and it was I was going and avoiding the gym and going to get a hike and work out there, and there were just an insane number of people there. So it was hard to do any sort of social distancing at that time because just in your normal, walking, you're going to encounter people within closer to 6 feet. And those people are also exercising. So they're breathing heavily and expelling God knows what from their lungs that you might be inhaling. So I had to stop doing even that. And I'm basically just working out in my front yard every day. And the wife and I take a short walk in the morning, about 30 minutes, and then come home. She works in the office all day, and I work out at the kitchen table, and that's pretty much how we're handling it. People here have been a little bit crazy for the last couple of weeks. I think the panic buying and panic hoarding. People are using toilet paper like it's prison currency at this point, because you can't get it. We have a friend who went to 4 different stores and ended up all the way over on the east side of town in Compton and had to stand in line for an hour and a half. And by the time she got to the front of the line, they'd only let each person buy 8 rolls of toilet paper. So that part's a little bit ridiculous because the toilet paper isn't going anywhere. You know what I mean? It's going to keep showing up at the stores, but people are so afraid of it running out.
The stores will be unavailable to them.
Yeah, they're afraid the stores are going to close or that the virus is going to be spreading and so contagious that they don't want to go out. So they're buying these massive, and people are buying, 50 gallons of water to have at home. And I'm like, it's going to keep coming right out of the tap. It's just not going to be an issue. But I mean, you go into the stores here by 3:00 in the afternoon, sometimes even earlier than that. They're completely cleaned out. The frozen food section is cleaned out. All the produce is gone. The toilet paper, the paper towels, all of that, the cleaning supplies. So
It's just human nature.
Yeah,
in
totally.
in my eyes, people go from not taking something seriously at all to you way overcorrect in the other direction where you hunker down. People are taking things in the other direction. I mean, you should take this seriously. You should always wash your hands. You should always,
It's a little disturbing how many people that's a new thing for, to wash their hands frequently throughout the day.
Yes.
But we've gone from a level of abundance thinking, where, especially here in Los Angeles, where you can just walk out and go anywhere you want and get whatever you want, whenever you want. And then now to sort of scarcity thinking, where everybody's afraid what they need isn't going to be there. And so they're kind of panicking and they're hoarding it. We bought a fair amount of groceries, more than we usually buy because we eat out a lot. But we didn't buy an insane amount of stuff. I usually buy 2 dozen eggs, and instead I bought 4 dozen eggs. And not because I thought eggs were going to run out, but just because we're going to be home more, we're going to eat eggs more often, and I don't want to have to go back to the store to get more eggs. I'm trying to limit my contact with people. But there were people in the stores who had grocery carts just overflowing with stuff, like 40 frozen pizzas and 12 bags of rice and as much pasta and sauce as they could get their hands on. And, they're freezing 10 and 20 pounds of meat that they're, it's going to take them a year to get through that.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
How big do you guys have, not you, but these individuals, do they have extra freezers in their garage or something? This can't fit in a normal refrigerator.
I guess they must, or maybe they're just not thinking about what they're going to do with all that when they get it home. They just think, I need it,
Man.
But our fridge and freezer are full, and our cabinets have what we need in our cabinets, and we'll be fine. Even if I couldn't go to the store for a week or week and a half, we'd be fine. But we didn't go nuts. And, I have 18 rolls of toilet paper here because it comes in an 18 pack. And that's the only reason I have that much toilet paper, because I know if I need to, I can go back to the store and get another 18.
That's rational. I don't understand. I don't understand how we've gotten to a point. Are the companies not producing here in Virginia? I've gone repeatedly to the store, and there's been no toilet paper at all.
Right.
So
I think that the companies are making and shipping just as much as they always did. It's just that when people get to the stores, they're buying 3 and 4 times as much as they used to buy. So it runs out, and then the store has to reorder. And Charmin can only produce so much toilet paper in a day, so they can only send out so much in a day, and that has to go through distributors. If you get it at your local Target, that Target didn't order it from Charmin. Target corporate ordered it, and then it went to a warehouse, and then that warehouse distributed it out to all the different Targets. So it's just a matter of the supply chain flow that gets stuff back into stores, and the insanity of people buying 4 times as much as they as they need. But the good news is that like I said here, the shelves are cleaned out every day, but they get a truck every night, and so there's stuff on the shelves the next morning, and then different people come in and panic because they saw the shelves empty the day before, and so now they think that it's going to, so it's
it doesn't make a ton of
propagating
sense
effect.
for the companies to because this demand is not sustainable, because it's not based in it's not like people are using 3 and 4 times as much toilet paper, so that demand is this is a real product.
Yeah, absolutely. It's become a commodity. Nobody would have ever thought of toilet paper as a commodity before, but now it's kind of a commodity. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you guys are handling it well there. I mean, there's not riots in the streets or anything here. It's just it's crazy at the grocery stores is pretty much all there is. And, we go out for a walk every morning. There's still too many people on the streets. There's still too many cars, but it's not anything like it is in a normal work day. So I'm glad people are, hunkering down a little bit and practicing that social distancing. All the restaurants are closed. You can order delivery if you need to, but other than that, there's no retail open. If you're not a grocery store, there's no shopping to be done. So movie theaters are closed and all of that stuff.
Interesting time to be alive.
Yeah, I don't know if interesting is the right word. It's a little bit frustrating and even concerning or alarming, but
terrifying at times because of some things that we may get into at some point here.
Yeah, and just because of the behavior you see of your fellow humans out there. Some of them are panicking too much, and some of them aren't taking it seriously enough.
Oh, no.
You don't, all right, so let's talk a little bit more about the politics of this whole thing. Have you been watching Trump's daily briefings in the morning?
I deliberately avoided the one yesterday, and it was the worst of them all. I went back, and I was just for him to even be at the lectern talking about deep state is just
it's crazy.
So removed from the seriousness of the moment. It's mind blowing. But this whole presidency has been mind blowing. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm frustrated by those briefings myself, and so I try not to watch them, but I also want to be informed and I want to know what Trump is saying. So I frequently do watch them. I didn't watch today's, but I was watching yesterday's, which was insanity. And I will say this, like, obviously there was a point where Trump shifted, where he was calling it a hoax almost one day, and then the next day he's holding these daily briefings with these somber tones and pretending like he's always been taking it very seriously. And when he first comes out each day and he's reading through his prepared remarks and he's sticking to the script that he's been given by the people around him, he has, at least the words have the right tone. He sounds like a total moron when he's reading them, which is always the way he sounds when he's reading prepared remarks. There's no energy or life to it at all. But at least he's giving some level of information and he's using the right tone. He's saying the right things. But once he's off the prepared remarks, it's totally off the rails. He starts yelling at the media. He starts talking about the deep state. He starts promising things that aren't real. He starts contradicting his own experts, and everybody behind him is sort of looking on like, oh dear God, what's he going to say next? But they're trying to keep, they have this dead expression on their face where they're just hoping that he doesn't say something that is just completely ridiculous. And even if he does, it looks
like a hostage video. It absolutely looks like a hostage situation.
Totally. And sometimes you can see one or two of them like snicker or like frown at what he's saying. And, yesterday you had, Dr. Fauci, who was like, he couldn't help himself. He started talking about the deep state, and Dr. Fauci was like, oh my God. And he actually did a face palm in the middle of, it was pretty awful. And then the fact that everybody who comes up to speak has to start their remarks by, praising Trump and, President Trump's bold and decisive action and, President Trump's leadership and all this stuff, which is, and when they're speaking, you can tell he's pretending he understands what they're saying. They were talking about they asked a question to Dr. Fauci yesterday about, the virus becoming aerosolized and being airborne. And he's giving an explanation, and you can see Trump like sort of nodding, but also squinting like he's trying to figure out what's going on because he's pretending he already knows all of this stuff when he doesn't have the intellectual curiosity to have really asked the right questions and know what those things mean. And it's really disappointing. The wife and I do wake up every morning, and we get up about 8 or 8:30, and Cuomo is doing his daily briefing in New York, and the difference
so
is
much better.
It's stark. Like Cuomo is calm and reassuring, but he's also not sugarcoating anything. He's giving you the facts, and he's telling you exactly what you need to know, and he's holding people accountable, saying this is what other people need to do. This is the issue that we're having. This is what we're looking to do to address that issue, and these are the hurdles that we have to cross before we can solve the problem. And he's clear and concise without giving you any false impressions or false optimism or false panic. He's doing exactly what he needs to be doing at the time, and then to go straight from that into the chaos that is the Trump briefing
the juxtaposition is unreal.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially when you look at the way they each handle the media, because Cuomo takes questions from the media as well. And, he addresses them by name, and he, even compliments their question. And he says, that's, an important issue, and this is how we're handling it, and this is how we're addressing it. He doesn't get upset about the questions. He doesn't get mad at the reporter. He's not pushing any kind of agenda. He doesn't talk about politics, and he's not constantly praising his own reaction. And all of that is stuff that's happening during Trump's briefings.
Well, that's the most discomforting thing about this whole thing for me, is because he set such a low bar, because he clearly is not a policy guy. He's not even an ideologue. he's a narcissist who ran for president because he thought he was so great, that his ideas are so good, even though he's a failed businessman. He's really not had a ton of success in his life. He's a casino bankrupter guy.
Right.
But he feels attacked. This feels like a personal attack to him, that coronavirus would dare happen while he's the president of the United States. That's how it absolutely feels.
And, when he says it's a hoax and it's all a plot to undermine him and his presidency and to make him look bad, that's the way he genuinely feels. Like,
yes.
He thinks this is something that has happened to him and to his efforts and his agenda. He doesn't think it's something that's happened to the country. So when he's having to go out there and address it as something that's a crisis for the country, you can tell and see that it's a struggle for him.
Like the lawyers would say, this is prima facie evidence of in psychological terms, he's a narcissist. He actually, he could be diagnosed. I mean,
100%. I'd be surprised if he weren't diagnosed by somebody somewhere, and we just don't have those records.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you saw the Harold Bornstein guy. Not to get too far off the track here. That's the guy who told us that before Trump was running for president. Does the name Harold Bornstein ring a bell for you?
I believe I've seen it on Twitter, but I couldn't tell you exactly what the context was.
So Bornstein is this, like, if you look it up, and I tell your listeners to look it up because it's quite a laugh. He's like a really weird guy. So, and when he was just not believable during the campaign, the fact that this was the guy that was saying that Trump was so healthy. And
that's that crazy
the letter was
doctor.
so, yes.
Yeah.
And he's the guy who told us that Trump was fine.
Yeah,
and
the
also,
healthiest man on earth or something.
And then Trump had sent his goons in, Keith Schiller, to take Trump's records back out of his office, to busted it. I mean, it's just unreal.
Right. Most transparent president in history.
Oh, believe me.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I don't know. I saw this poll that showed that over the course of a week, Trump's approval for handling the crisis, shot up quite a bit. One week it was 43% approve and 55% disapprove, and then the next week it was the reverse of that. 55% of people approved and 43% of people disapproved, which, kind of shows the effects of just acting in the very most basic presidential sort of way he possibly can and getting 2 hours of free airtime every morning to sort of, distribute lies and, what I would call propaganda.
Yep.
But those briefings are full of misinformation and false optimism and contradictions of the scientists and suggestions that, these weird combinations of medicine are going to work, which, I'd kind of like to talk a little bit about that. He continues to suggest that the anti-malarials are going to work, in contradiction to what his own expert would just testify or say at the podium. And I think he does that because he doesn't want to have to say the reality, which is that the vaccine he promised would be done very soon is actually going to take 18 months. And he doesn't understand why. And so he thinks it's like a movie where you just throw things at it and eventually you find something that works. And I don't think he understands why it's irresponsible or reckless. I mean, maybe he does, but I know that he doesn't care. Yeah. And worse than that is his base doesn't care because they don't understand. Like I was telling somebody this morning, it's a political no-lose situation for him because it's not going to work. And, the doctors know it's not going to work. And you and I know it's not going to work because we listen to the doctors. But his base doesn't care because what he can say is, well, at least, I'm willing to try anything for the American people. I'm willing to try anything to solve the problem. And then if by some miracle it does have some mitigating effect on the virus, then he can claim to be the most brilliant, man who ever lived, who's smarter than the doctors. So it's like Trump just throws things at the wall, but it's not like regular politicians who are constantly throwing things at the wall to see what sticks, and then they pick that up and run with it. With Trump's base, everything he throws at the wall sticks. Yep. They just buy all of it.
Well, and the point is, it's all about owning the libs. So that's what this whole thing does too. Yeah. Is it just owns the people who Trump's people don't like. It's the media. You've seen he's now turn this into racism, race baiting, and anti-media attacks, and Trump is being mistreated, and Trump is being being unfairly not given credit for taking decisive action in January when he was calling it a hoax. He said it was one person who came in from China.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And he's talking about, we have 15 right now, and that's going to be down to 0 very soon. And it's all under control. And we have, treatments coming. And that he actually literally said a treatment is basically a cure, which is, that was ridiculous. So, I mean, when we say, I think a lot of people don't understand when we, I guess, Trump detractors say he's mismanaging the situation, they point to the things that he's done. But those things that he has done are just the very basic required things that would be done in this circumstance that anybody would do. They're not bold, brilliant, decisive actions. They're just things that need to be done. And most of them are being done 3 weeks late, right? And then meanwhile, there are a half dozen things that he does almost every day that undermine the effort to actually manage and control the virus. And so that, when he does things like pass on responsibility and accountability by not issuing national guidelines for quarantine restrictions that states can pick up, and instead says that all the governors and mayors should get together and work out those guidelines and enact them on their own.
And put their own orders in for the respirators. How dare they expect that the federal government, the largest movers of material in the world, to be able to get some damn respirators for people?
And then distribute them to where they're needed, The thing about continuing to suggest the antimalarials work, that's mismanagement, and when he uses an announcement about border closings that his own experts unanimously say is too late and not helpful, but he uses that announcement to instead push his agenda about immigrants and insult other countries and insult his predecessor. He continues to blame Obama for testing.
That's part of the owning the libs.
Owning the libs, which is just absolutely nonsense. And then 90% of what he's doing is bragging about what he's doing, even though the things he says he's doing, he's not really doing. The way he announced it, nobody's ever been able to do anything like this before, and this is unprecedented in the history of government, and all these things. He's
that's not an accomplishment, Donald.
It's not, no. And he's using these things to filter into his agenda and push his agenda, as opposed to actually taking time out from the agenda to manage the crisis. And that's the kind of thing we mean when we say he's mismanaging what's going on. And it's hard for me to understand that other people don't see that. They literally just accepted him saying one day it's a hoax, and then the next day saying, I've always been taking this seriously. And there's no cognitive dissonance or anything. They forget the one thing happened, and now they're in this new reality where whatever Trump said must be the way things are actually happening.
Well, I was on the radio with a guy in Chicago, Steve Cortez, this week with him. He's a Trump guy. Big Trump guy. He's at the White House with Trump all the time. But he brings me on kind of regularly just to give a little back and forth, I guess, to try to test out, see what folks like him and a guy named John Fredericks do is they beta test his BS to test out to see how much the base will bite on the bait that they throw out. So he was talking about, doesn't this prove Trump was been right about China all along, that, our material, and then Trump was the one who was praising their response to coronavirus in January. It's just...
And there was actually a story out yesterday about how he was getting intelligence briefings, and he was getting briefings from his doctors and health people about how serious this was going to be and the threats of a pandemic, and he was ignoring them and instead listening to what he was getting from President Xi out of China, which is, part of the problem with his administration as a whole, where he ignores the intelligence and believes what he wants to believe instead. And that's how we ended up where we are. Like, if we'd been doing a lot of the stuff that we're doing now a month ago, the curve would be flat already. We wouldn't be at the risk that we are. And it's just unfortunate that we didn't have the systems and the teams and a president in place who was able to have that sort of proactive thinking, because all Trump does is try to manage the next news cycle. Whatever cycle he's in, that's what he's trying to control, and he doesn't care how that affects anything coming out of that news cycle. He'll just do something else to manage whatever the consequences were, and his base will accept it.
Trump doesn't just lie; he inverts the truth.
Correct.
He doesn't just give a spin or like a bending of the narrative to shine. Everybody kind of does that when your wife come in and say, "Oh, did you do that?" and you grab it and you're like, "Yeah, I did it," and you're doing it. Kind of deal. Where fuzzy kind of lies.
Reality. I said this the other day as well, where media pundits and people who are trying to sound smart say that Democrats and Republicans are just living in two different realities. And I'm like, no, that's not what's happening. One of us is living in reality, and the other is living inside a manufactured delusion of false narratives and counterintuitive ideas and counterfactual ideas that they just accept outside of reality. And the rest of us living in reality have to deal with that and pretend that they're valid points that we're supposed to address, even though they're mind-bogglingly, infuriatingly stupid.
And they're deadly. This is deadly.
This part of it is deadly. Yep. They're calling it a Chinese virus. And my wife is Asian. She's not Korean. She's not Chinese. She's Korean. And so that part of it affects me a little bit more. Like, I bristle at it when I hear it, but I know why he's doing it. It's a xenophobic and racist dog whistle to his base. And it's also because he's setting up China as one of the fall guys for what's actually happening. Nothing that goes wrong in this country will be his fault. It'll all be because of what happened in China, right? But these people who are like, well, it did come from China, so what's wrong with calling it a Chinese virus? You had the West Nile virus and Ebola and whatever. But at some point, you're either doing it just to make the people who think it's offensive, just to deliberately offend them, which makes you an asshole, or you're doing it because you're trying to push a genuinely racist narrative. So you have to start thinking about what's the motivation and agenda of the people who are doing that, and why is it so important to them that they be able to call it the Chinese virus? You know what I mean? Because it may have come from China, but that's not the official term for the virus. Even when it was coming from China, somebody might have called it the Chinese virus at some point on CNN, and so people are like, even CNN calls it the Chinese virus. No, one person on CNN said Chinese virus because they were trying to reference what they were talking about. They weren't labeling it the Chinese virus.
Yes.
So, but Trump is deliberately trying to label it a Chinese virus because that matches his agenda about both China and immigrants and everything that he wants to do. And he can set that up as a scapegoat for when this is all over. He can blame the governors, he can blame the media, and he can blame China. And that's
it's just catnip. It's just catnip for his base. It's just
100%.
there's a large section of that 46% of the country who likes Donald Trump, who on one day will say they disapprove, or every day say they disapprove, go and vote for him, or go vote for Republican leading candidates who suck up to him. But he hits on it every time. Because it's just like back with Obama when they wanted him to label it radical Islamic terrorism.
Right.
It wasn't good enough that he would call it terrorism or all of the worst things in the world. They want to label it something because they think that the racism or labeling or being able to scapegoat someone for what's going on actually fixes the problem. Calling it the Chinese virus doesn't fix this problem. It doesn't create respirators. It doesn't get people freaking masks that they can wear and not have to rub hand sanitizer and reuse for a week.
Correct.
I mean, this is unreal what is going on right now.
But what it does do is rile up his base, and it helps him cast the libs as part of the problem, right? Like Marco Rubio the other day tweeted out something about, oh, we've got X going on and Y going on, and this is happening and this is happening, and people are losing their jobs and blah, blah, blah. And some people want to argue about, what to call the virus. And I was like, that's just so disingenuous, because it's not an argument about what to call the virus. It's an argument about what are the motivations of the people who are deliberately calling it something for their own agenda. It's about the consequences of race baiting, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And what the effects of that are going to be for actual people.
And red siren alert, Senator Rubio. People are being beaten up and bullied and harassed just for being Asian because nobody really understands, that not all Asian people are Chinese. That's
right.
Not a fundamental elementary thing that people understand in this country. So unfortunately, you're not just scapegoating, quote, Chinese people.
Or the country of China. You know
yes,
what I mean?
Yes.
People don't make those distinctions. Anyone who walks by them who may appear to them to be Asian, again, because this is all phenotypical, just subjective nonsense, really. The whole construct of how people understand perceive what other people's racial background is just another huge conversation. But it's silly, and it's really dangerous. People are being beaten up and harassed because of this.
And I'm sure that Rubio's stance would be the same if it were the Cuban virus or
right.
the Florida virus. It's just it's ridiculous. It's an otherization, so that you can pretend that it's not something that's really it's something that's happening to you, as opposed to something that's happening to everybody. You know what I mean? It's something that you're being assaulted by because it's coming from this outside group that you've managed to otherize.
Yep.
All right, so let's move on a little bit and talk some about the relief packages that are coming out of Congress right now. So far, we've got 2 bills, right? And they're working on a third. There was a bill on March 4th that was for $8.3 billion that was supposed to go to vaccine research and aid to state governments. And then there was another bill on 3/18, which, the first bill came out of the House, and then the next bill, I think, was started in the Senate, and it's a bill that provides sick leave and family leave for those diagnosed with the virus or those who have to take time to care for someone who is, and also for those whose children schools have closed, so they have to go home or they have to stay home to take care of their children. But we've got a third bill that they're currently working on, which is supposed to be the big financial relief package, right? And there's there are a lot of suggestions about what that package might include. Nobody knows exactly what it's going to have. There have been talks about it, anything from $1,000 checks to every American to $3,000 for a family of 4. There are potential bailouts for airline companies and travel industry and hotels and things like that. So, I mean, I guess, what do you think that those bills should include? What do you think Democrats should be asking for to be included in that next bill?
Oh, this is a leadership opportunity, and since we are talking politically, politics and policy, they go along really well if you know what the hell you're doing.
Right.
So because they need 60 votes, McConnell needs 60 votes to get this thing through. So that gives Schumer an enormous amount of leverage to because they need Democrats' votes. So we need to make sure that this is not cut off at an arbitrarily low threshold. So, for instance, like in an area where I live, Arlington, Virginia, if we made a cutoff where it's $100,000, or you and your combined income make $125,000,
right,
we would not receive any help, even though for our area, it's not like we're living large. It's just an area with a high cost of living. And if you don't take those kind of things into account, then it can not have the intended effect that you want it to have. So they have enormous leverage on that point, and I really think that really they can shoot the moon here. We can make this extend unemployment benefits have the larger conversation, because coming out of this won't be we're not going to be able to go back to the well on this and get another opportunity.
Yeah.
The Republicans are going to say, okay, we spent, whatever cha-ching number. We're done with that. Everybody, pull your damn bootstraps back on, that kind of way of thinking about things is what it's going to be. So Schumer and them really gotta come together and think bigger than smaller here, and just go with whatever McConnell, I see that it's direct cash payments for small businesses and every American. What do those things mean? Working in Richmond. Sorry, I'm really rambling here a little, but working in Richmond, I work directly with the policy. So a lot of times people, when they think about politics, they think the laws are just, if you say, that small businesses get a tax cut. What actually denotes a small business?
Right.
Is it how much they bring in, or how many employees they have, a combination of that, different things like that. So you got to really drill down and really make McConnell and them actually do something they don't want to do, and really foist it upon. We can get we have 47 Democrats, so we would only need 13 Republicans to vote with us as well.
Yeah. I think that you're definitely right. Like, politically, we can't expect that there's going to be, a fourth bill coming down the line. So Democrats need to be pushing to make this bill what it needs to be. And I think that, I talked a little bit earlier about the ideological differences about what government is and can do and the role that it plays. And I think that this is one place where Democrats need to be stepping up and saying, no, we need to do these things, because otherwise we're going to have massive failings financially and culturally throughout the country. And I think that, one of those things needs to be trying to push for these, not just like single one-time payments, but to have recurring payments of some level that are going out, and you can have qualifications and benchmarks for who's getting money at all or who's getting how much money. Like, my wife and I, we don't need money. We don't need a payment of $2,000 every month. We're going to be fine. She's got a job. I don't think it's going anywhere. And I have income that's going to come. I'm a personal trainer, so I put all my clients on hold. But I'm doing some sessions online, and I'm doing, video conferencing with some sessions. Well, some clients while they do their sessions. So I'm still making income. But there are a lot of people who have been laid off, who have nothing, and people in the restaurant industry who are way behind. And this could go on for, it's not going to be a 3-week thing.
I would say we need to do at least 18 months.
Yeah. I mean, we need to have at least a plan in place that goes for 18 months. And then if we get out of the woods, we can pass another resolution that scales it back. You know what I mean? We don't need to be worried about doing things piecemeal, like, we're going to do this for now, and then we'll revisit things in another 4 weeks, because
McConnell's not coming back to this.
Right. McConnell's not coming back to it. And the way that the political process unfolds in this country with, okay, we're going to go over here to our corner and we're going to come up with a plan, and you guys are going to go over there and you're going to come up with a plan, and then we'll get together and we'll negotiate those things, and then we'll see if we can get the White House on board, and I don't like you, so you can't be a part of the negotiations, and whatever you suggest, like the fact that McConnell is not including Pelosi in the negotiations for what the bill should have. They're just negotiating only with the White House and trying to, even though the bill is going to have to be passed through Pelosi's chamber as well. I mean, it's mind-boggling to me that even with something like this, there's that much politics being played with.
They're going to lose. The American people don't like McConnell or Trump. And that's,
they definitely don't like McConnell.
They keep trying the same playbook over and over and over and over and over again.
Yeah. And, the one thing that I'll say to sort of wrap this part of the discussion up is that I think that if this were happening in a Democratic administration, like if we were on the brink of financial collapse 6 months towards the end of Obama's administration, the McConnell and the GOP, they would have zero interest in helping. No. They would not want to do anything. They'd be like, tough shit. And I know that they would be that way because they were that way at the beginning of Obama's administration.
Yep.
They had an opportunity to be a part of the team and say, this is what we need to do. This is how we're going to help. This is how we're going to set America right. And they refused to. They actually took a stance of deliberate obstruction.
Yep.
And then they blamed Obama for things not happening as quickly as they could. You know what I mean? It was absolutely ridiculous. So the fact that they're actually willing to come to the table now and these huge they're suddenly willing to go big and bold and throw as much money as they think might need to fix it is drawn entirely from the fact that they're trying to save what people are now seeing as a Republican economy and will see as a Republican economy.
Yep.
They're going to blame people are going to blame the party that's in control. Coronavirus, no coronavirus. They don't give a shit. If their finances have gone to crap, they're going to blame the party that's in control. And the Republicans know that, which is why they were obstructionists during the Obama administration, and they're compliant with Trump during the Trump administration because they want to be on the train of the American people, benefiting from the perception that the American people have about what the economy is. Now, the truth is, the economy was a house of cards anyway, right? It was going to fall because it was built on illusions. It was built on stock buybacks and artificially inflated stock market and all kinds of things that weren't real. You know, people were working 2 and 3 jobs, so unemployment was low, but they weren't really getting the benefits that they needed. They weren't getting the income that they needed. There was a whole lot of problems, and it was going to collapse sooner or later. Now, I was worried that what was going to happen was a Democrat was actually going to win in November, and then the economy was going to collapse in February or March or, sometime in the first year or two of that administration. And then the Democrats get blamed for it, even though it's a result of the policies that were happening during the Republican administration. I don't like that this is collapsing the economy in the way that it is now, but I'm at least appreciative that because there's a Republican in the White House, the Republicans are willing to try to do something about it, whereas the Democrats are willing to do something about it all the time and regardless.
I know, and that's just a larger worldview. I feel like Democrats, we've got to learn how to fight. We've got to know that we are in a fight. A lot of times Republicans, they scare us because they go to their anytime that we flex our muscle back or fight back. They go to the politicization, and that's why people don't like Washington. It fits in with their worldview, but they do this every opportunity they get.
Yep.
Every opportunity. They
fight dirty, and we don't. And we change our ideology, or we don't stand up for the ideology that we should be proponents of because we're afraid of what Republicans are going to say about us. And that's the wrong way to negotiate. We let them control the message in that way, and we've let them do it for 40 plus years so badly that at this point we have presidential candidates for the Democratic nomination proposing, public options as a progressive policy, which was actually a Republican proposed policy from 1994. And we have the Republicans now pointing back at that and calling it socialist. And they've just constantly, little by little, they've drugged the center as far to the right as they possibly can. And to be honest with you, the Democrats have let them do that because they don't stand up for the policy. And if we'd accepted a public option in 1994, we'd probably be at universal health care by now. If Obama had proposed universal health care in 2008 or 2009 when he took office, we'd probably have a public option now. But instead, we try to negotiate. We take this position that, we'll be in the center and people will like that. And Republicans are like, all right, morons. Well, we're going to go way over here, and then you'll have to negotiate from the center to the right as opposed from the left and end up in the center.
Yeah, and it just kills me. And I did not vote for Bernie Sanders in 2016, and I did not vote for him in 2020. I've been able to vote so far. But I am so thankful for Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and other people who've stepped forward and have pushed the bounds of what people understand about
normalized
ideologically in America.
Yeah. I did vote for Bernie in 2016 in the primary in California. And the reason that I did it was exactly what we're talking about, which was I wanted to elevate those ideas and pull the party back to the left. I voted for Elizabeth Warren here in California in 2020. And I have my own personal reasons for having moved from Bernie to Warren. That's a much larger discussion. But let's talk. Since we're on Bernie, let's move on to the Democratic nomination and the contest that's still going on there. That's sort of it's fallen onto the back burner and it's in the shadows a little bit now. But there's a lot of what's going on right now that affects that contest, both in the ways that people are campaigning and in what voters might be looking for in a candidate, right? And not just that, but will people actually be able to vote? How is it going to affect turnout? And are we putting ourselves at risk by delaying elections now, by setting a precedent that's going to allow somebody to delay election in November? So I'm really worried about a lot of that stuff.
They can put that into the relief bill. Actually, that's one of the big things Democrats have to do.
Yeah, voting by mail. They need a national standard for voting by mail, and they need to include money in that bill that goes to the states that allows them to set up those systems.
Yep.
Because we still have states, something like 20 states yet to vote in the primary. Ohio delayed their election. The 4 states, I guess it was 3 states that just voted, actually had higher turnout than in 2016 for their primary. But we need to be getting because we don't know that this is going to be over by November. So we need to be having systems in place that will allow people to actually cast votes, and we don't have somebody, giving an Oval Office address in, mid-October saying, unfortunately, we just can't have people going to the polls, and so we're going to have to suspend this election, because he will do that if he has the chance.
Yes.
So what is your perception of the race right now between Bernie and Biden? Where do you think we are?
I think the party has kind of really, they've clearly chosen where they want to go in terms of who they want to be the standard bearer. Not the candidate that I voted for. Again, like you, I voted for Elizabeth Warren. I thought she'd be the best at the job. She'd be an excellent vice president, but they have a Republican governor there who would be able to name her replacement. So we may need to keep her in the Senate. Mm-hmm. But what's so important for everyone to understand, to take a fresh breath, understand that Joe Biden, at the end of the day, is running on. If he were to become president, he would have the most progressive administration in American history.
And the same was true of Hillary Clinton in 2016.
Yes.
The Democratic platform in 2016 was the most progressive Democratic platform in history, and it was because of Bernie Sanders. And people should applaud that, and instead of continuing to poke their finger in the eye of the party and the establishment or whatever, they should take the victories that they can get and continue to move the party to the left. Now, I'm not going to tell anybody how to vote. If you're a Bernie Sanders fan and you can vote for Kermit the Frog if you want to. Yep. And in a situation where it's Biden versus Trump, if you're not willing to vote for Biden, then you may as well vote for Kermit the Frog, because you're going to have it's going to have the same impact on the election. You're not going to get anything that you want. I think that, when you say the party has chosen, obviously, I think that, people want to talk about the establishment and, the DNC, and there's all these conspiracy theories. And
certainly, that's not what I meant at all.
Yeah, no. I don't think that. I follow you on Twitter, so I know where you're coming from with that. But I think people are abused of a lot of misconceptions about how our elections happen in this country, and they think the DNC is holding elections, and they're not. Right? It's individual states are holding elections, and the individual parties in those states, and the DNC doesn't have anything to do with it. Yep. But I do believe, obviously, because of what we talked about earlier with the center having moved so far to the right, there are more moderate Democrats than there are what I consider myself, which is a progressive Democrat.
Yeah.
But one thing that I would hope that I do think Biden is going to get the nomination. But one thing that I would hope that the party as a whole would recognize, and I said I was a progressive Democrat. That's not actually true. I've never been a member of the Democratic Party. I'm actually an independent, but I've voted, especially for president, entirely Democrat, and I've become more progressive over the last 10 years or so. But one thing
that's how most people are. Actually, most people these days actually identify as independents and vote, especially in presidential years, for the same party over and over and over.
Right. Yeah. There's been a mass exodus from mostly the Republican Party over the last 4 years, especially. But there are a lot more independents registered in each state than there used to be. But I think that one thing that this primary should show the Democratic Party as a whole is that the wing of the party that supports Bernie Sanders and supports his policies is not small. They are not a fringe. Like, obviously Biden has, more popular vote and more delegates, but there's a huge chunk of the party that believes in what Bernie is saying. They believe in his policies. They want those policies, and they feel like they've been, over the last 30 years, sort of ostracized from the party and sort of pushed to the fringes. And even it's not just Republicans that are saying those policy ideas are crazy. It's Democrats who are trying to look like they're in the center because they're campaigning for this idea that we're going to own the center, but you can't own a center that's constantly shifting. And so you have all these people who are on the left who are more like FDR Democrats, who believe in, the role of government where it needs to be, and they believe in regulation, and they believe in certain standard of life for American citizens through the regulation of government, who feel like they've been alienated from the party itself, and they're sick of it. Personally, I'm sick of it. I'm tired of the Democratic Party looking at me on the left and telling me that I'm part of the problem instead of recognizing that I'm part of their party, and they're trying to, we have people who are suggesting we should be chasing a few potential Republican votes in this election more than we should be identifying with and bringing into the party those people on the left. And that to me seems like a real problem.
Oh, absolutely. And we're, it's frustrating, but at the same time, it charts out the work of the progressive movement. And I would still, in the broad scheme, if we're going to, broad strokes, Joe Biden fits. He is a progressive American, but he's not progressive if we're talking about in terms of the party.
Right.
But the progressive wing of the party, or the progressive kind of heart of the party, we absolutely have our work cut out for us to speak with older Americans, and especially older African Americans who are likely to vote for the Democratic candidate when they actually get to the polls. But you have to show that is a winning strategy, that you can win as a progressive. There's a tag of unelectability that comes along with being a lefty or a progressive.
But Democrats have placed that tag on themselves.
Yes.
That's the problem. They've placed that tag on themselves. So, I hope that we continue to move towards more progressive policy. I hope, I don't agree with everything Joe Biden says about healthcare, and I don't agree with everything he says about, the Green New Deal. But it would be far better than what we've got. And if we'd had Hillary 4 years ago, we would be far better off than we are now. The Supreme Court would be in a much better place. And if we don't get a Democrat this time, we've lost the Supreme Court for a generation. Like, it's insane. It'll end up being 6-3 conservative, and that's simply unacceptable.
Even more.
Yeah,
it
potentially.
Could be more.
So, I guess to bring this back full circle to Politidope, one thing I wanted to talk about while we're on the subject of Bernie and Biden is the young voters, because we don't really have that many young voters. We have a lot of young people, but they don't vote, so you can't call them a young voter.
Yep.
So Bernie makes a big deal out of, I'm going to bring all of these new people into the party, and I'm going to bring in young people. And that really hasn't borne out in the primaries in most of the states. Now, he does win the demographics he should win, but he's not really increasing in large real-time qualitative numbers.
No.
He's not increasing the number of young people who vote all that much, but he is winning young people. But in order for that to really make a difference, he would need to more or less double the amount of young people who are voting, and they're not voting. So as someone who's sort of on the ground working in that issue every day, particularly, what is the problem? Why aren't the young people voting, and what do you think that we really can do to make them vote?
It really just is going to take a cultural kind of revolution. Bernie talks about a political this is more of a cultural revolution around the stigma and the kind of, nerdiness that people feel about politics. People feel like you have to have, perfect policy expertise on every issue, and even if you like a candidate or you agree with everything you've heard, maybe it's better to leave it up to people who know more.
Right.
It's kind of like it's a similar effect, and I'm not religious myself, but it's kind of how folks feel like when they're deciding whether they're going to join a church, right? Some people will decide like, oh, I need to get my life together before I start joining a church. So it's the same kind of effect where people kind of feel like, before I start getting involved with politics, I need to read up, and I need to read up, read as. Put it on the back burner, let's bring up the Tinder app or whatever else that you may be interested in doing.
It's pretty funny. I mentioned earlier I'm a personal trainer, and there's a similar effect with fitness, in that people are constantly telling me they want to work out with me, but they need to get in a little bit better shape first. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. Yeah, that's the whole point. I think there are a lot of reasons that young people don't vote. I started voting. I was very civically engaged. Obviously, I'm very into politics and the ideology. I'm interested in, not just the functional, practical civics of it, but in the philosophy that goes into political science and that sort of thing. So I've always been really interested in that. And I started voting as soon as I possibly could. I voted for Bill Clinton in his re-election bid was the first time I was able to
96.
Vote. Yep. I graduated high school in 95 and was going to school at A&M, Texas A&M, which is one of the most conservative schools in the country, no doubt. And I was a member of the Young Democrats there, because they didn't have a Young Progressive Independence Party, or club rather. But I've always been very engaged in the politics. I think a lot of there are things, I think, that young people, they think, number one, like you said, well, I don't understand it. I don't know enough about it. They think it doesn't really matter. They don't understand how it affects their lives. They think one vote isn't really going to make a difference. And I think a lot of them think that, well, those people don't represent me. I'm not going to, I don't want to vote for somebody because they don't represent me. But what they fail to grasp is they don't represent you because you don't vote. Right? They don't speak to the issues that your generation is interested in, because it's not going to get them anything. You're not going to vote regardless. And Bernie Sanders has proven that beyond a shadow of a doubt. So for me, and, I have another podcast and an article that I'm writing that I'm planning on coming up, which is about democratic reforms to our system. I think the only way in the long run that young people vote is if we have some sort of a mandatory voting system. And that's something that I don't know if you believe in, but I definitely believe in it. I think it's part of being a civic, participating, responsible member of a society, is that you have to be engaged in the political process and casting your vote. I don't want people to have to go to the polls. I don't want anybody to have to go to the polls and cast a vote for either Bernie or Biden. You know what I mean? So there are other things that have to be done in order to have a mandatory voting process. One of those is, stepping away a little bit from just the two-party system. And another is giving people a
ranked choice.
Yeah, ranked choice and a none of the above option. So I have to vote. You're going to make me vote. I want to be able to go to the polls and check a box that says none of these people, right? So that people can hear, because I think in the last election, if people could have gone to the polls and ranked choice vote, and none of the above was an option, none of the above would have been the statistical winner in the first round. Now, obviously, none of the above can't be president, so you then have to go to people's second votes. But I definitely believe that we should have a way for people to go to the polls and express their discontent with the choices that they're given. You know what I mean? And if you want to go,
I totally agree.
Yeah, if you want to go and just check none of the above and not check anything else, that's totally your right. But you have to go to the polls and do it. Or you have to fill out the vote by mail ballot or whatever. You have to engage in the process, and you have to either pick somebody or you have to say none of these people. But you actually have to take the step to do one of those things.
I think this is a really interesting, and I don't want to stretch along your podcast too long, but this is an interesting conversation I've had running dialogue with a few people, and most of the time I'm kind of like a quote unquote big government kind of guy, in that kind of worldview.
Yeah,
I think with the mandatory voting, I think there would be an interesting constitutionality concern, but someone, my friends who I've talked about with this say it's very akin to like jury duty, mandatory jury duty.
Right.
I think what we could do, another idea to make it, instead of Big Brother kind of forcing your hand, what if we did like a $50, kind of like Andrew Yang talked about with $50 democracy dividend, right? You only get it though if you voted in the last general election. Or the last state, whatever election or something like that.
I don't know that $50 would be enough to get people off the couch, but it's a step in the right direction. You know what I mean? There are electioneering laws in different states that disallow doing anything like that.
Yeah.
But I think that that's one of like 7 ideas that I have about what would improve the democratic process. And like I said, I'm planning a podcast in the near future. If you'd like to be a part of that and come back on and talk about some of those things and some ideas that you have, I think that would be great. I've certainly enjoyed the conversation today.
Yes.
And I hope that, we have a chance to talk again, in the relatively near future. Obviously, I'm locked up at home for, the unforeseeable future, to be honest with you. So I've got plenty of time on my hands to sit and
certainly
put a microphone in my face and do a podcast. And I hope that it doesn't last for 6 months, but it might.
Yeah, well, I'm available, and just so you and your listeners know, I'm also a Young Democrat alum as well. I was the president of my Young Democrats at VCU. That's kind of how I first got involved as well.
Yeah. Do you consider Virginia a blue state?
At this point, yes.
State?
No,
it's blue now.
Oh, it's blue. Yeah,
okay.
We're strong. We're strong. We've been kicking ass. Really for the better part of this decade.
Yeah.
But Donald Trump turbocharged those trends.
Yeah, totally. Some of what's happened with your state legislature and the turnover there and the things that they've been able to pass in the last couple of years, it's pretty impressive. It's a model for what a lot of other states need to be doing.
North Carolina's next. We're transporting to North Carolina.
Yeah. Well, is there anything you want to plug for, Politidope, what you've got coming up? The website is politidope.com. Is that right?
Yes. Politidope.com. On Twitter, I am Politidope. It's spelled just like it sounds. POLITIDOPE. This year we had a planned event for June 19th here in DC for any of your listeners, but that is on hold for the moment. It's supposed to be our Politidope launch event, so we can allow people to experience, really what Politidope is about, and talk and meet with people who've inspired us or who work with us and all kinds of different things. That will be happening, so I'm looking forward to that, and looking forward to being back on, and I'll probably plug it again and give an update on what that's looking like.
Yeah, I plan to do these podcasts, like I said, because I'm locked up at home. I'm trying to get on a more regular schedule and get things out more frequently, just like, Pod Save America does, maybe 2 a week. So maybe even next week or the week after, we'll have you back on, and maybe I can get a couple of guests at a time, and we'll have a more open, broad-ranging discussion.
Awesome. Sounds great.
All right. Thanks,
you.
Matt. This has been the Left Crew Politics podcast. I'm Jeremy, signing off, and you can find us on Twitter at Left Crew Politic. And you can find our podcasts where you found it this time or anywhere fine podcasts are found. Take care, everybody.
Thanks for listening to this episode of our Left Crew Politics podcast. You can find us on Twitter at Left Crew Politic. Follow the Facebook page at facebook.com/leftcrewpolitics and the LCP website, leftcrewpolitics.com. Search for our channel on YouTube, iTunes, and Google Play.